her belongings given away, and her family left searching for answers. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, full confession.
Okay.
It's a true crime confession.
I'm wondering what it is.
I mean, I think I've said this to you before. I don't actually watch a lot of true crime shows or documentaries. And I think you actually consume more of those probably than I do.
Probably. I mean, I watch a lot of documentaries, and a lot of the good ones happen to be around true crime. So, yeah, probably, maybe.
Yeah, so like it's just not my thing. I mean, I read a lot.
You read a lot
crime.
more true crime than I do, because I'll only read the true crime that you make me read.
Right. Yeah. Like, yeah. And like, I'm excited about upcoming titles. Like, I just did like a Girl Hunt, which is my true crime newsletter. I just did a upcoming fall 2025 books so that I could just like.
Oh, okay. I think I saw a glimpse of it, but I had to get over here
to
meet with you, so I didn't get to look that over.
Right. It was like all the books, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So
are you going to, and those are all your hopefuls for this year?
Yeah, so they're going to end up on my TBR. My TBR, though, is so big.
Mine, too.
Yeah.
I was actually just wondering the other day if I would be able to actually complete all of them in my lifetime. And I don't think so, because I keep continually adding also.
Yeah, you know, those writers, they just keep on writing.
Right. Right. So I keep adding. I did end up going through and taking a few things off that I know I'm never going to just grab.
You're just like, I'm lying to myself.
I will bring that to there's a library book swap locally this week, and I'll be bringing those there because I somebody else will probably want to actually read them instead of them sitting on my shelf.
But bonus, you can look through the Girl Hunt newsletter and add books from there.
All the ones I just took off, I'll just
you're going to replace them with some great true crime books. But one exception I did recently make was that I started the Netflix documentary about Amy Lynn Bradley. And I was like, you should watch it, right?
Yes.
What were your thoughts?
I don't, you haven't finished it, right?
But
you know kind of loosely.
I know
like
her story.
We don't know if she's still with us somewhere in some location being held, or if she left of her own free will, or if she passed away.
Yeah, I mean, that's
or if she, and did she pass away by choice or not? Like, there's too many unanswered questions, and I feel still, after watching the entire thing, like, there's just more questions.
Right. I mean, I think that's the case with a lot of missing persons cases, right?
Right.
You know, some of the ones that we talk about on here, there's a pretty clear indication about what trajectory the case might have taken.
Yeah.
But then there's also ones like, you know, her case where you're just like, oh, there are many possibilities and theories.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I have like my opinion based on just seeing it. But then there's like that little bit of doubt because some of those pictures of the person that they think is her really does look like it could be her.
Yeah.
But then I'm also like, well, you get past a certain age and then you think you might be able to get out of that situation or find somebody in that long of a time. Because, I mean, I think she's only a few years older than I am. And I feel like, you know, when you're around a long you're around a long time, not saying she's older, I'm old, but I mean, it's been a while. At some point, there'd be more information. I feel like if you're still around, there's going to be something.
Some more clues.
Some more clues, or at some point where she's just going to be like finding a way to either break off or actually at some point passing away, and then somebody being able to tie those things together. Yeah. So, I mean, my thought is that she might have just had enough of this life while she was on that cruise. So,
yeah. I mean, I think that there are so many possibilities with her story and the story that we're talking about today too. And I'm bringing this up because, like, I did not finish the documentary yet because I went on vacation.
You left us all.
I did. And I have to confess, I am not a cruise person. So, like, seeing all the, like, and hearing about, like, that, like, the whole thing makes me claustrophobic. The idea of being on a cruise and like give me a tiny church in like northern Italy filled with like fungus mummies or like hiking through like a gorge for miles. Like I will do that, but the idea of like organized activities with like groups on a cruise, no.
Thousands of happy travel companions, like basically cut off from the rest of the world together on a floating vessel.
Yeah, I want nothing to do with any of them.
I have been on some cruises and I did enjoy them, but I don't feel like you could tough through the peopling involved.
That is a lot of...
It's so much peopling.
Of peopling.
Yes. Yeah. There is no way to be solitary on a cruise.
No.
No.
But, it was just me and the fungus mummies. So.
Okay, so like, I do want to hear about that after.
The fungus mummies.
Yeah, so like you will be telling me about that in the future.
I will tell you about the fungus mummies, but like we were the only ones down there.
Like how close were you? And did they look fungusy or mummy?
I mean, they look a little dry. It's just dry.
What makes them fungus?
Because that's how they were turned into mummies.
Okay.
Partially.
Where are they, like, the pictures you put up? I'm just going to ask now. They were like mostly sitting upright and stuff.
Yeah.
They're not laying down.
Well, so now they're laying down.
Okay.
So there are 5
And there are people posing with like their arms around them. Did you pose with your arm around them?
You can't touch.
Thank God. I'm so happy you cannot touch them.
No.
I saw that and was immediately alarmed. Like, please stop touching the fungus mummies.
So, yes, I don't even know how they discovered the fungus mummies. I will have to go on a further research journey than I had energy for in the midst of the trip. But, like, basically there's a small town in Italy where they discovered, from the 17th century until, the early 20th century, the region basically was conducive to turning people into mummified remains after they were buried, and they discovered this and then they unearthed them. I'm not sure why yet. I will figure this out.
So those are unearthed humans.
Yes. And now
that were mummified accidentally through a fungus.
And also I think it's the conditions of the soil. So there's like basically the right atmosphere for it. And now they
like
are
the peat moss preservation.
Yeah. So there are 5 mummies on display. There are more of them, but only 5 are on display. They have to go down into this little like crypty thingy.
That's the best.
And then it's like this little circular thing, and then they're in display. They're behind glass, but they're laying down.
We do share that, our love and tolerance for all things slightly creepy and death related.
Yeah, so my kid was like, what the heck?
I have one kid that would probably not go in at all, and one kid that would be right there with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kid went down and then was like, this is a little weird. And I was like, I know. Yeah.
Okay, well, at least you weren't like sitting on a chair with your arm around some.
No, you cannot touch them anymore, which is for the best for everyone involved.
It's the best for the humans that are alive and the humans that are no longer with us.
Anyway, so that is my dream of a trip. That is how I travel. It is a little less like group, I don't know,
little less live people.
No.
Little less live people, a little less festive.
Yes. Just that's where I'm at. Anyway.
Okay.
I recognize, though, I am in the minority.
Yes.
For this.
We will make that assumption.
Both for, like, the interest in the mummies and also cruises. I swear we're going to get to the story in a second. But, and I know this because, did you know, which I now know, 37 million global passengers right now each year on cruises.
37 million.
That is a lot of peopling.
The thing that I'm wondering, because, like, I know some, like, serial cruisers.
Uh-huh.
Like, how many of those are repeat?
Probably a percentage.
Like, the same person going on 7 cruises in a year.
Mm-hmm.
People do it.
They do. Like, there's that one cruise that was, like, on TikTok. You're not on TikTok, so you don't know. But,
I am not on
But it was,
TikTok.
like, people who are, like, on a 9-month cruise. Like,
yeah. See, that's, like, that's a lot. That's a lot of
cruising.
time.
Anyway, so,
yeah.
Cruises. To be clear, are relatively safe-ish.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the possibility of, like, violent stomach bugs, they are very, very...
Yeah, but I think what people...
Isn't there another documentary about that? like poop cruise or something.
I think I was also traveling when that came out, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to brave that one or not.
No. But anyway, crimes and accidents, they do occur. So no matter what you thought happened to Amy Lynn Bradley, and no matter what you thought happens to the woman that we're talking about today, just an awareness of personal safety and the safeties of others is paramount whenever you travel anywhere. And that does include cruises.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go back to 2004. I'm going to set the stage because a man named Kendall Carver, he picks up the phone at his home in Arizona. And on the other end is his 13-year-old granddaughter, and she is living in England with her dad. So this is his granddaughter is calling him.
Okay.
And she says, "Do you know where my mommy is? I've been trying to call her and she hasn't called back for days. Is she with you?"
Okay.
Now, Kendall, he recognizes the concern in his granddaughter's voice. Her mother is Merrian, who's his oldest daughter. She had been living in Boston, and she was kind of still pulling together kind of the pieces of her life after what was a contentious divorce. Okay, so
Marian's divorced. She's living in Boston away from her dad, who's
in Arizona.
He's in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. And
okay, and the granddaughter is in England?
Yes.
With her dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Merrian wasn't with Kendall, and Kendall hadn't heard from her recently either.
Okay.
So he says, "Don't worry, we'll call her and we'll find out where she is."
Mm-hmm.
And after getting off the phone, Kendall turns to his wife, Carol, and says, "Our daughter appears to be missing." So Kendall would have no idea how achingly true that statement would be. To get a sense of who Merrian is and what happens in the aftermath of her disappearance, you need to know a little bit about her. Merrian's family is from the New York area. In fact, her father, Kendall, was the president of a New York insurance agency until he retired and decided to move the family out west. But Merrian, who's the oldest of the daughters, she didn't want to go. She was someone who had what was described as an independent spirit, and she really wanted to stay on the East Coast where she went to college in Boston. She eventually became an investment banker, got married, and had a daughter. Now, there's not actually a lot we know about Merrian's life before her disappearance, but we do know that her family describes her as vivacious. They also share that she loved writing poetry, and that's actually what drew me to her story in the first place. Because Vanessa, you know I make a point about sharing other writers and poets here. Like Dorothy Arnold and Nicole Russo and Barbara Newhall Follett, who was such a fascinating person. I'm still obsessed with her. But because it does feel particularly poignant to write and share a poem about another writer. But for Merrian herself, I think some of her life was kept private. We do know she struggled after her divorce, and she did have suicidal ideation, but her family emphasizes that she was a pretty resilient person. And after the divorce, she took time off from her job. She was able to live off her investments and her trust funds during this time. That brings us to the summer of 2004. Merrian was then 40 years old. She was living on her own in an apartment in the Boston area, while her daughter was with Merrian's ex-husband in England. Which is why, with her parents in Arizona and her daughter in England, Merrian was in many ways alone in the Boston area without her family that summer. Now, with this distance in mind, the first thing Kendall does that September 1st, after getting off the phone with his granddaughter, is to call Merrian's apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Like his granddaughter, no one answered Kendall's calls. Now, this was alarming enough and out of character enough that Kendall just kept calling her phone over and over and over. And each time he would just get her answering machine. Next, Kendall and Carol started working their way through the list of everyone in the Boston area they knew Merrian. They called her friends, they called her neighbors, they were kind of like scratching off a list of everyone that they were talking to. And each had relatively similar things to say, that they hadn't seen Merrian recently and that no, she hadn't shared any plans with them. No one they spoke to could offer insight as to where she could be. Now, 2 days into trying to get a hold of their daughter, Marian's parents switched tactics. They become worried about the possibility that she could be injured or have had an accident where she was incapacitated and couldn't answer the phone or come to her door. So they called the Cambridge police and they had them do a welfare check at her apartment. And they were also unable to make contact with her. They even considered the possibility that Merrian had potentially harmed herself. And just as an emphasis, since we already started to talk about this, suicide and suicidal ideation is a part of this episode. Now, a few years before, in the midst of that divorce, she had talked about committing suicide and had briefly disappeared for a month. So this led them to worry that they were kind of back in this cycle again.
Do you know where she went?
I don't. That has not been shared publicly, right? So her parents are like, are we experiencing this over again with her, right? And as the days passed, they just continued to try to reassure their granddaughter each time she called for an update about her mom, right? Now, finally, at a loss of where she might be and concerned that something happened to her, they file a missing persons report with the Cambridge police. Several days later, they get the first real information on where Merrian could have gone. Now, with her marked as a missing person, the detective assigned to her case was able to access her financial records. There, he found credit card records for round-trip airfare and a single ticket for a celebrity cruise aboard the ship the Mercury. Now, this ship was set to depart from Seattle on August 27th and then return to Vancouver on September 3rd. Now, as a reminder, Kendall initially spoke to his granddaughter on September 1st, so kind of in the midst of the cruise.
Okay, so nobody knew that she was going on a cruise, though.
She had not shared this with anyone.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did they say that was out of character? Did they?
They didn't, but I do get the sense that this was unusual, right?
You would tell either your daughter or your dad. You'd
someone
tell
would
somebody.
know. Yeah, right.
If not everyone.
Now, despite not having been informed of the trip, her parents were kind of relieved at this point, right? Because she wasn't injured. She'd simply gone on a vacation without telling them. I mean, again, she's 4 years old. So.
I know, it's annoying though. As a parent, I'd be like, I don't care how old you are, just...
Yeah. I mean,
So as a parent, I could see them being annoying, but she'll be back.
Yeah, before the episode started, I was talking to Vanessa about going on my recent trip and how my mom, started stressing out when it got to be, past 4 p.m. her time, and I hadn't contacted her yet. And I'm like...
Because no matter how old you are, you're somebody's baby.
Yes. And so I have to contact my mom every day? Yes.
I mean, yeah, because if you didn't, that would have been annoying.
So she had to make sure it was a video chat every day. So
yeah, I'll back your mom up on that.
Okay.
Yeah. She was right. You're going to do the same to your kid one day.
I probably will. My kid will be so annoyed with me, but...
That's part of it, right?
Now, so... They've got this sense of, okay, here's some answers. They finally have a clue, right? So again, they're probably in this more relieved state, okay, we have some indication she's on vacation somewhere. But Kendall decides to call Royal Caribbean International, which was the parent company of Celebrity Cruises. So she was on a Celebrity cruise. His goal was just to simply ascertain and make sure that she actually got on the Celebrity cruise, right?
Which I think is a good plan for him to be doing.
Because at this point, they're well into September. She should have been back from her trip, right? It's well past the time of the ship docking. So he needs to find out this information. Now, while the company was helpful at first... in Kendall's quest for information, ultimately Merrian's family would be left with more questions than answers as they dove into what could have happened to her that summer. What Kendall would soon learn is that Merrian did indeed board the ship. So she was there. But by the second day, the cruise line reported that she was not sleeping in her cabin.
By the second day of the cruise?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, to be clear, we are viewing this from the lens of today. Obviously, we're a podcast about missing persons, we know that this is not a good sign, but to the cruise line, basically that detail alone wasn't enough to draw any conclusions because guests, particularly single guests on cruises, might actually just be staying in someone else's cabin, right? But What the cruise line official said next was the absolutely chilling part. It's that when the cruise came to its final port in Vancouver, Merrian's belongings were left in the room. Here, the cruise line seemed to follow what was standard for them when guests forget belongings, which is that her clothing and personal effects were donated. They did say they retained some papers, keys, and computer disks, which had been placed in storage.
I could see donating it if it's like a couple items that are left behind, but this is the entirety of her packing.
Right. We're going to get into that a little bit more.
But seems like maybe we should not be donating evidence.
Yeah, there are some big missteps that are happening here.
So one of the things when I did watch the Amy Lynn Bradley doc was that the cruise line didn't seem very helpful.
Yeah.
So is that what we're going to kind of be seeing again?
I mean, I think what happens in cruise lines is sometimes what are fairly like typical behaviors on a cruise, like say not going to your room, right? In this case, like that's a missing person situation.
Right.
But if it's brushed aside as like, oh, they're just in someone else's.
Yeah.
Or, when someone leaves some stuff behind in their room, because people do. Yeah.
But there's differences between what they probably regularly see and then something like this.
Well, we're going
to get there. Okay.
Now, Kendall, he processes all this information pretty quickly, and he asks the risk manager that he's talking to if he could be emailed the files that were on those discs. He hoped that there would be some kind of like files that would hold clues where Merrian might have gone. But when Kendall received the files a few hours later, he said the only thing on them were copies of some of her poems. Left with this, Kendall and Carol start poring over the poems. They're hoping that they would indicate something about their daughter's state of mind, but the poems didn't really yield any clues for them. Now, after this conversation, Kendall believed that the cruise lines become less forthcoming with information, and he soon hits a snag that other families who have had a loved one go missing on a cruise encounter, which is just who exactly would be in charge of investigating Merrian's disappearance. Now, the cruise originated in the US, it ended in Canada, so it would be necessary to pinpoint when exactly she went missing to determine who would pursue the case, right? So who exactly should be handling this? Largely stymied, Kendall acknowledged early that it was unlikely that his daughter was alive given the information that he had. So he comes pretty quickly to the point where his daughter is not alive. But finding out exactly what happened to her was met with very little information. He eventually hires a private investigator from California who actually tracks down the cruise ship. It's the Mercury, and it's the boat that Merrian had been in, and it was then in Monterey, California. At this point, it's like now several months have passed after she was last seen. No one expects there to be like exactly evidence on board because it'd been turned over so many times.
Yeah,
like those cruise ships, like they go
pretty
in
well
and out.
Cleaned like several times over at this point. Yeah.
Right. But what they wanted was essentially people to talk to, like witnesses who might have spoken to Merrian or remembered seeing her, right? The PI encountered one manager who named a cabin steward who had been working when Merrian was on the cruise. She said that he was unavailable to talk because he was working on another ship. And the hotel manager, the person who oversaw the ship's hotel operation, was on vacation. But she did reveal one thing that the family hadn't really been aware of, I don't think, yet, and that's the cruise line kept surveillance tapes that could be reviewed if an incident was reported. She said that these tapes were kept for a couple of weeks before being reused, and said at this point the tapes from Merrian's cruise probably would have been erased. Now, during his investigation, the PI ultimately reported that there just wasn't enough cooperation from the cruise line for him to conduct a thorough investigation. He was able to learn that Merrian never used her Sea Pass, which was a type of onboard credit card, which was also used as a form of identification, nor had she purchased drinks or made like other purchases on the ship. Also, there was no record that she left the ship at any of the ports, but the cruise employee did say that there was no telling if she got off in Vancouver, since passengers were not required to scan their Sea Pass when they disembarked at the final location, right? The PI was also able to examine Merrian's room. He noted that her room was on the panorama deck, which was more than 100 feet above the water. It's a significant drop if something had happened to her or if she had jumped, but he also noted that although her room had an ocean view, the windows of her cabin were bolted shut.
Okay, so it was not a balcony room or anything like that. Okay.
Yeah, because I know in like the Amy Bradley case, like
she was on the balcony.
She was on the balcony, right?
Right before she disappeared.
Now, if something would have happened to her, it would have had to have been in a more public location, but her room was just a short walk from the elevator and stairs that led to an open air deck. Ultimately, the PI said that he felt her disappearance could most easily be explained by suicide, but noted that he didn't have enough information to rule out foul play.
And we know she was cruising alone?
Well, there are a lot of questions there as well.
Okay.
Now, the report that he gave, though, it ends up being just a lot less full, and there are fewer answers than what her family is hoping for. And without the cruise line being more forthcoming, Kendall tried yet another tactic, and that was working with some lawyers who were able to get court-ordered subpoenas from some of the cruise members. Mm-hmm. Most notable of these is the cabin steward in charge of her room. His name is Domingo. He gave a statement over the phone. Domingo said that he met Merrian on the first day. He remembered her because he'd been surprised when she'd answered the door because he thought the room had been booked by a couple and their baby.
Okay.
Now, on the first evening, he said when he entered the room, she was lying on the bed and she was wearing a blue dress, had a long-sleeved blouse. Merrian told him that she was going to go upstairs that evening, but that she wouldn't be going to the dining room. While he was there, he was also surprised by the lack of personal items in the room. Merrian didn't have any luggage with her, just 2 small handbags that were sitting next to the bed. The next day when he arrived, she was there again. This time she was just wearing the blouse and her underwear. Merrian invited him in to make up the room. When he came back at 7:45 p.m. for turn-down service, he encountered Merrian again in her room. This time, she said that she would not be going to dinner, so he showed her the menu. Merrian ordered 2 sandwiches, and Domingo returned about 15 minutes later with them on 2 plates, and the plates were on a tray. He says this was the last time he saw her. He came back to her room at 10:30 the next morning, but she didn't answer when he knocked. When he went in, the bed didn't look like it had been slept in. He assumed that because he brought her the tray the night before, that would be something he would have to clear out of the room, but the tray was gone. Now, he also remembered seeing that her blue dress, seemingly the only article of clothing that she had, was hanging up inside the closet. Besides the one pair of sandals that she'd brought with her, he didn't notice any other clothing items in the room. Her handbags, though, were beside the lamp along with a manila envelope. When he noticed her gone, he went and he told his supervisor, but the supervisor brushed off his concerns and said, just do your job. Domingo noted, yes, it's true that guests would often stop staying in their rooms, and so this was not unusual to encounter, but he did notice something that was different, and that's that $107 were left under his name card on the dresser. And so this is where guests would typically leave tips under the name card, right? But usually that would be on the last day of the cruise. So Domingo, he doesn't take the money. He just keeps checking in and doing kind of the turn down service, which includes leaving a chocolate on her pillow. When he noticed that the money was still there, the chocolate hadn't been touched, he reported it again with no results, right? And each night he keeps on swapping out the chocolate for one with a different color tin wrapping. And he keeps reporting this to his supervisor that she wasn't in her room. So
he's absolutely keeping track.
Yes.
And reporting. So he's doing everything that you would hope someone would do.
Right. So he's hey, even though this is typical for people maybe not to be in their rooms, we're just going to report this, right?
Especially the lack of clothing, right?
Yeah. So I get that.
Because people, when they go on cruises, like to have all the clothes.
Right. Multiple changes of clothes.
Multiple changes, right? And then the fancy clothes night and all the
I'm just assuming things. Since I will never go on a cruise. But
I mean, you've seen the pictures online.
I have, yes. We'll be back in a moment. Takes the money, the envelope, her belongings. He brings them to the supervisor who puts them in his locker. Now, the family, they also speak to the hotel manager whose name is Christos. He said that he wasn't aware Merrian was missing until he received an email from Merrian's family. Now, remember, Christos would be in charge of all of the cabin rooms, right? Mm-hmm. And hotel services on the cruise. So the fact that he didn't know about Merrian and her not being in her room during that cruise is a problem.
But also, how does he not know when Domingo keeps reporting it?
So Domingo's not a direct report to Christos. Like, Christos is the...
But, like, whoever Domingo reported it to didn't...
Right. The supervisor. Who
didn't
we're going to
send
call
that to
the
Christos.
supervisor.
Huh.
Yeah.
So strange.
So honestly, this is all sort of weird because on the other hand, he says, like, I didn't know anything until I got the email from her family. But also he says that the cruise company had done an investigation on their own and had fired Domingo's supervisor. And he said that's because of poor performance and bad judgment in this case involving Merrian. So just like it seems a little weird. Now, allegedly, Christos said we felt it would be better for the supervisor and the company that he would not be employed with us anymore. But he also added that indeed people did spend their vacations how they liked, and sometimes that did mean not using their own rooms. And he says, like, really, cruises do not like to interfere with people's personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in addition to getting statements from these employees, Merrian's family was working to track down the supervisor that Domingo reported to. Like, where's that guy? To date, they have not been able to fully locate him. They found, like, his potential address in Greece. He's, like, reportedly never there. They can't get a statement from him. And that's really, it is complicated by the fact that people who work on cruises come from all over the world, right? So you're doing, like, international tracking of people. Now, in addition to that, the family asked the cruise line for a manifest of everyone who's traveling on the trip with Merrian.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so this is the question that you asked, like, was she just, like, not with someone?
Alone? Yeah.
So what they were hoping to see is that if anyone from, like, the Boston area might have been also on the ship at that time, like, could she have been traveling with someone else?
Mm-hmm.
But Kendall says, like, they were just given a list of, like, 2,000 alphabetized names with no contact information or addresses. So the list was, like, you know, practically unusable.
Right. And it was before, like, being able to do really good internet searches of people.
Yeah. And, like, even then, like, you know, you're just given a name. So what if it's like Bill Smith?
Right. How many Bill Smiths are there in the whole world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just like, is it Bill Smith who lives in, you know, Cambridge, Massachusetts? Right. Or just like Bill Smith who comes from Seattle and likes to cruise a lot?
Or not even, like, he could be from a different country.
Yeah.
Especially with it landing back in Canada, too.
Yeah.
Half those cruisers could be Canadian.
So it's like, there's a lot going on there, right? So Kendall also asks for security reports, investigation reports, captain's records, like basically just a whole host of documents that should be available. And by February 2005, which is months after she went missing, he received a security report about her disappearance. It included a September 30th report from the manager of fleet security that indicated that the company's own regulations had been violated. Essentially, it's going back to, like, also your concern earlier, which is like Domingo made the initial report to his supervisor, and that should have gone on from there, like to the captain's bridge. The security office should have been notified. Like, none of that happened. In addition, like, her room should have been secured and the items should not have been removed. Right. So this wasn't, again, if they had known these two things were happening, right? So this was not just a guest forgetting her items in her room. It would have been obvious to the rest of the crew that, like, something was going on that needed more care.
Right.
So all of this gave, like, very little solace to the family. And in March of that year, they held a service for Merrian, though they didn't necessarily call it a memorial service. During it, her poetry was read and it was set to music, kind of as a way to celebrate her and her work. They're now 8 months out from that vacation, and the family was really divided on what they thought could have happened to her. Kendall believed she was dead, but Carol, her mom, held out hope that she was alive somewhere. By that summer, though, they sued Royal Caribbean in court. And that October, the cruise line made a statement. It read, Mrs. Carver had severe emotional problems, had attempted suicide before, and appears to have committed suicide on our ship. The death of Merrian Carver is a horrible tragedy, but regrettably, there is very little a cruise line, a resort, or a hotel can do to prevent someone from committing suicide.
But we don't know that's what happened.
Right.
One of the other guests on board might have done something.
Now, Kendall said, like, that statement to him was shocking. And he said, how do they know for certain she died?
Right. She might not be dead at all.
Unless they know something that the family didn't.
Ooh. Okay.
Right?
Right.
Now, ultimately, Several core theories develop in Merrian's story. First is the idea that Merrian may have committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
She struggled with situation-based depression in the past at the end of her marriage, and that became the core component of the cruise line's argument that this is what happened to her. Like, that's what they're using in their narrative, right? Now, while her room didn't have a direct balcony, she was close enough to an open-air deck. Additionally, the original PI had noted that it was a 100-foot drop to the water, which is a significant fall even when you're not factoring in like frigid waters.
Mm-hmm.
And Domingo had noted that she didn't bring luggage or clothing with her, which is something that would have been happening on a cruise of this length, right? Like,
yeah, also it was kind of weird because you said he was expecting a family with a baby, and now there's this woman who really didn't pack anything.
yeah,
Just a lot of it just
odd.
And odd enough that he deals with thousands of people.
Yeah.
And this stood out to him.
Yes. So it's very clear, like, he was tracking, paying attention.
He was trying to do it.
The family, though, rejects the idea of suicide at this point, right? And he said there hadn't really been any indications, at least, that like something was happening in her life that would have triggered her depression or suicidal ideation. In addition, she was like actively writing poetry, something that she deeply loved. And why, for instance, would she have booked a round trip ticket if her intention was not to return to the Boston area? Right.
Well, and I feel like that's like a lot of wishful thinking because, I mean, a lot of people don't look like
they like that.
You know, they don't look as depressed as they are.
Yeah. Most depressed people are
really good at hiding it. Yeah. So, I mean, for that's a little bit like, on the family's part, that's just like wishful thinking.
Well, there's a few other things that kind of call this into question, right? So first is one thing that Domingo said, which is that she ordered 2 sandwiches the night before she disappeared. And Kendall said, absolutely not. Like, Merrian, like, was not a huge fan of sandwiches.
Okay.
A fellow sandwich hater. Thanks. So, like, it wouldn't make sense for her to order 1, let alone 2, as, like, her potential last meal.
Right.
In addition, we know that the tray wasn't in her room, and Kendall also says that things of value, like her billfold, jewelry, passport, have not, to his knowledge, been located. So, in a scenario in which she would have ended her own life, we're picturing that Merrian would have been in her underwear. Because remember, her dress was hanging up, and she didn't seem to have other clothing with her. So, like, what is she doing? She's like walking down the hallway in her underwear holding a tray.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of weird things there. I mean, like you said, if your intention was to end things, and you hate sandwiches, why would you eat a sandwich? Why would you be in your underwear? Why would you be walking around with a tray?
Yeah.
Like, none of that.
And where are the valuables?
Oh, right. That seems like a theft situation, maybe.
Right. And no one sees her. Like, there are 2,000 in theory, because the passenger list was 2,000 long, 2,000 people, not including crew on board, and no one sees her.
Huh.
So, yeah. Her family decides to hire another PI whose name is Ken Young, who says that yes, there's a possibility that she may have intentionally jumped, but that there were other bizarre elements that don't seem to make sense from this vantage point. And that includes the fact that Domingo noted that there was a manila envelope in Merrian's room that he turned into her supervisor, and to my knowledge, this has never been located. So what was in the envelope? Also, he wouldn't rule out that she wasn't alive. Because the cruise line didn't include any checkout system once they docked at their final destination, technically she could have left then.
Mm-hmm.
But these remained only theories, and Merrian's family wasn't any closer to finding out what happened to her. The closest they ever came was when a representative from Celebrity's parent company revealed at some point that they had seen video coverage of Merrian that night, and cameras recorded her falling from the ship's deck.
Is that true?
Well, her family was never able to review this footage because officials say that footage was erased.
How can they have watched it and let it be erased?
So in this scenario, what they're essentially saying is like, yes, we recorded an incident in which someone may have fallen or committed suicide, and our decision as a company was to erase that file.
That doesn't make sense.
Like, why would that happen?
It shouldn't.
Yeah. Particularly because
I'd be embarrassed to admit that I
like
erased something like that.
Because it's just like, you know that the family is going to have questions, or there could be like legal consequences, or you could be sued as a company. So a decision to like erase a security camera tape that documents what happened.
Huh. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So her family has never been able to review that footage themselves. But what did remain clear through all of this is that even though the cruise line did have guidelines for situations like with what happened to Merrian, they should have protected her or offered her family information. Those guidelines were not followed. And though Merrian's family learned that the supervisor was fired, they really did question what kind of oversight was happening with cruises in general. So in their quest for answers, the family started to connect with others who had lost loved ones on cruise ships or who had been assaulted while on a cruise ship. Merrian's parents, along with several other families, founded the International Cruise Victims website, which is up today. And it's a place for people to connect with their own stories and to organize. They said that by 2006, they were aware of more than 20 other families who were seeking information on passengers who had gone missing on cruises. Kendall said that as awareness grew, a lot of what they were hearing about was actually about sexual assaults that were happening on cruises. These families were able to raise awareness about cruise ship safety through this connections that they were building. And in 2005, there were congressional hearings. And in the aftermath of this, there were some attempts for change by Royal Caribbean. They hired, for instance, a VP of like global security. And the argument really became about relative safety on cruises. Between 2002 and 2005, there were 24 missing passengers, which is a small percentage of what was then 10 million cruise passengers each year. And can we talk about, oh my God, the cruise industry has really blown up. 10 million? Anyway, so the cruise lines were saying, like, look, like this is a relatively safe experience for travelers and likely safer than a lot of other travel experiences, right? But the advocates were arguing that crimes on cruises were just underreported. Kendall said that there needed to be better crime reporting standards when it came to cruises, and he advocated for the passage of a bill that would require cruises to report a crime or a missing person within 4 hours of a supervisor learning of the incident. So in this instance, like when Domingo goes to that supervisor, right?
It makes the most sense because they're in a limited, they're in a closed space.
Exactly. Before the cruise is just like moving on, right?
Not letting anyone off or back on. Let's get it solved before that happens.
Yeah, so like
between ports, right?
Time is of the essence here.
Yeah.
Right? And if they didn't, like that the cruise line could be fined $250,000 or even potentially that particular ship could be denied entry into U.S. ports. Right.
It seems very reasonable. This seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Repercussions,
yes.
Right? Now, the cruise lines actually fought back against this, saying that this duplicated, both U.S. law and international laws that were already in place. So, we don't need other laws. We're good.
But there obviously weren't any laws in place because then we would know where she is.
There are protocols, there's guidelines, but Kendall was like, this is not enough. Now, the bill did kind of stall out, but in 2008, John Kerry, who was then a representative in Massachusetts, he hears Kendall's story of what happened to Merrian, and this instills in Kerry the belief that there does need to be stronger reporting requirements to protect passengers. So Kerry takes this on, right? And largely the cruise industry is fighting against all these legislative moves. They are not thrilled about it. And I didn't know this until working on this episode, but millions of dollars are spent each year by the cruise lines in lobbying efforts. So basically there is an association of the cruise lines, right? And they lobby representatives to essentially pass laws or stop laws that would benefit the cruise industries. And that kind of, obviously that makes sense, but I just didn't know it was millions of dollars.
So they're sculpting the law to fit what they want to do instead of revolving their business around the current law.
Right. So they're like, hey, let's promote laws that benefit our business, or let's crush laws that would harm us, right?
It's interesting and it makes sense.
Yeah. Now, there's this immense financial backing, right? Millions of dollars. But that also meant families like Merrian's were fighting against a Goliath. They didn't have that kind of financial backing. But suddenly in this process, the cruise lines give up resisting. The president of the Cruise Ship Association sends a letter of support to John Kerry, who co-authored the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, saying that they now supported the act. The bill was then unanimously approved and then kind of made into law. And like that all seems very strange. Like, why did they go from fighting it to like being like, yeah, we're on board? And
is it so we wouldn't see something else?
Yeah, well, so it's because basically there was a potentially costly amendment for them. Now, the 1920s era Death on the High Seas Act. Yes, Death on the High Seas Act.
1920s era Death on the High Seas Act. What?
Yes, so
what are you introducing here?
So there's like this very old law.
Okay,
called the Death on the High Seas Act to talk about what happens when someone dies on the high seas. Right. And basically, it enabled families to sue for a person's estimated earnings potential, right? So if you took someone like me who makes like $0 and...
So your family will get...
$0.
They'll get to sue them for $0.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But you take someone like, my husband who makes significantly more than I do. Like
significantly more than zero.
Significantly more than zero. There's only up from there. I could sue if he went missing or something happened to him, I could sue for his potential lifetime earnings. Now that he's like in his like mid-ish 40s, less life. But if he was in his 20s,
more earnings.
Right. Okay. So that kind of had been how it was structured, right?
Okay. But I mean, it doesn't really like help a ton, does it?
No. I mean, like grand scope of things, being able
like
to
a relatively
sue.
small thing. Like you're only worth what your earnings were.
Yeah.
That part's a little
Yeah. But there was a potential amendment that would have increased the damages. So there was an amendment that was being proposed that would have given family members the right to pursue punitive damages as well.
Right.
So that would have increased lawsuits costs substantially. Yeah. So it crushed that amendment. So they were like, let's just get rid of that. And then we'll agree to what you're asking.
Well, I'll just stop putting value on people based on what they earn.
Right. Now, this ends up being a major win for Kendall, right? Particularly for Kendall because he'd been working so hard for this. But what he didn't know at the time was that language had been inserted into the bill that limited public access to reported cases that had been closed by the FBI. That made it nearly impossible for the public to find out about crimes that had occurred on ships. So if the FBI closed a case...
So that us as the general cruising public can feel safer about going on our trip because we don't know about all of these.
Yes. So
things.
if the FBI decided to close a case or finished with a case, that reporting statistic would not be available to the public.
But I still believe that anything involving a missing person should be able to be public knowledge.
Yeah, so like
how else do we find them?
Yeah, so
right? Like,
so so Merrian's case, for instance, would be an open case, right?
Okay.
Unless, the FBI stepped in and said, we've determined that this is what happened, and they closed her case.
But if they did say, okay, it's definitely suicide,
and then they closed
would
her
they
case,
close her case?
Then that would mean in the general public,
then we wouldn't keep looking for her.
If you were looking for reporting statistics, so like if you're like not just like about looking for her, but if you were like, how safe is it to take my family on a cruise?
Right.
So
that would be deleted from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if you're like, how many sexual assaults happen on cruises?
Any of those closed cases would go away.
Yeah. Now, Kendall finds this out and he is not happy. And he contacts Kerry's office because John Kerry was the one who had like co-sponsored this bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's told essentially by the press secretary that, yeah, Kerry had indeed been aware of the change in language to the law. That also meant, though, that Kendall's fight just really wasn't over. And the act was signed into law by Barack Obama in 2010, but it was amended again in 2016. So he just continued to fight for changes. And in 2017, Kendall received a public policy award during the annual National Crime Victim Service Awards for his continued advocacy efforts. So I'm really thankful that he was recognized for his continued work. And a representative from the Department of Justice said, Mr. Carver has worked through the anguish of losing his daughter to fight for the rights of families across the globe. The Department of Justice is proud to honor him for his outstanding service and for his unflagging pursuit of justice on behalf of the injured and the aggrieved. Now, There really doesn't seem like there will ever be full answers in Merrian's case because of the violation in procedures, for instance, or the erasure of the tape, and the fact that her personal effects were missing. Now, on one level, her disappearance is a reminder about the complications of cruise safety, particularly when we're talking about jurisdictions and laws. So I just feel like we should all be aware of that no matter where we're traveling, even when it's cruises, right? But I really want to kind of wrap up our episode talking about Merrian herself for a minute, because we've spent so much time talking about cruises, cruise safety, what happened to her. And what I did find is that at the Paradise Valley United Methodist Church in Arizona, there's a bronze statue which is dedicated to her, and it's called the Gift of Life. And it features a young woman with a book in her hand, and her other hand's kind of outstretched, and there's a butterfly resting on her finger. It's based on Merrian's poem titled The Butterfly, and it's located in the church's prayer garden. Now, Merrian was more than her disappearance, and I hope that some of our listeners will go and visit with the statue until the next time I can make it to Arizona myself and can do that. Once. Merrian Carver, 40, missing since August 28th, 2004, from Seattle, Washington. After Tove Diddlesen. Once, the moonlight, the glimmer, the sparkled shore, the heat, the lingering, the love. Now, the salt, the crests, movement, a daughter, an ocean, trust, hallways, locks, another empty apartment, stewards, captains, poems, a careful unfolding. You're like lightning in a bottle, he once said. The desire to hold on to hope came too late. The divorce ending before the horizon split in two. People know only the surface of our stories. You can hold a butterfly on your finger if you're still enough.